Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This Islam-hating priest burned the Qur'an during a heated debate with this intelligent Kiai, but this priest was left speechless and crying during the debate. Look at his fate now and the hundreds of people who converted to Islam after this debate. The full story is set in a small town in the United States. The name of Pastor Terry Jones has emerged in a surprising way, not because of his kindness, but because of his blatant hatred for Islam. He often stands in the pulpit of his church with a thunderous tone, accusing Islam of being a religion that threatens Western values. He frequently makes incorrect quotes from the Qur'an, then manipulates them to incite the anger of his audience. But the most controversial action he did was to burn the Qur'an in public. This action made his name a hit in the international media. He didn't care about the criticism he received from all over the world. For him, his action was God's calling to save America from the threat of Islam. With full confidence, he challenged anyone who dared to refute his views to a debate. "If your religion is true, prove it in front of me," he said in a loud voice when one of the local media interviewed him. The challenge was not just an appeal, but rather a mockery of the Muslim community, which he considered cowardly. On screen, Muslims in the United States began to feel provoked. Incidents of hatred against Muslims increased, and several mosques were reported to have received threats. Enter Kiai Jafar, a cleric, and a figure who offered an unexpected solution. He accepted the challenge to debate. Kiai Jafar is not an ordinary figure. He is a leading cleric from Indonesia who has preached in various countries. With a calm demeanor, he is known as a cleric capable of explaining Islam with wisdom, even to people who hate him. When the news of his acceptance spread, it was met with a mix of anticipation and worry from the Muslim community. Though many were concerned about his safety, Kiai Jafar remained undeterred. Day by day, as the debate approached, Terry took full advantage of the moment to amplify his platform. What happened during the debate left everyone stunned. The outcome not only silenced Terry Jones, but also inspired hundreds to embrace Islam, changing the narrative forever. He continues to insult Islam. In various broadcasts and uploads on social media, he described himself as a hero who fights darkness. In a television interview, he even brought the Qur'an and threatened to burn it again on stage. "Debate, let's see. Will their God save this book?" he said mockingly, followed by laughter from his audience. Kiai Jafar Suwas, who opposes such provocations, chooses instead to draw closer to Allah, strengthen his spirituality, and fast. He considers this debate not as a mere forum for arguing, but as an opportunity to correct mistaken views about Islam in the hearts of those watching. Despite his calm demeanor, Kiai Jafar cannot help but feel worried about the provocation. Terry has made real threats, and some threats of violence have been received through anonymous messages. However, Kiai Jafar chooses not to discuss them with others. "Every risk is part of the struggle," he says to himself as he folds his prayer mat after evening prayers. News of the debate has attracted national media attention. The auditorium where the debate will take place is predicted to be packed, and thousands of people are expected to watch it live via television broadcasts and social media. Terry Jones is increasingly enjoying the spotlight. He calls himself a fighter for truth, claiming he will reveal what he believes are the lies of Islam. However, unexpectedly, Kiai Jafar's decision to accept the challenge has sparked a wave of solidarity. Support has poured in from both Muslim and non-Muslim communities. Even several religious leaders, including a well-known moderate pastor, have criticized Terry's actions as shameful. "Insulting other religions is not a way to understand the truth," said the pastor in an interview the day before the debate. The atmosphere is growing increasingly heated. Terry's supporters held a small parade around the auditorium, carrying banners with provocative writings. On the other hand, the Muslim community gathered to pray and send moral support to Kiai Jafar. An old woman from the Muslim community, with tears streaming down her face, said, "We only hope that Allah will protect Kiai Jafar from injustice." On the final debate night, the atmosphere felt tense. The auditorium was filled with various groups of supporters, from those wearing t-shirts with the words "Stop Islam" to Muslims who arrived with pounding hearts. In the middle of the crowd, Kiai Jafar walked in calmly, wearing a simple white robe. His face radiated determination, even though in his heart he knew that tonight he would face the fire of great hatred. Kiai Jafar's steps seemed to bring calm amidst the noisy crowd. Meanwhile, Tur Jones was already on stage, smiling triumphantly. For him, this debate was just a formality to solidify his prominence. That night, two figures with vastly different missions stood face to face. One carried the fire of purity, while the other embodied the weight of the burden felt by Kiai Jafar. Though he appeared calm in front of others, Kiai Jafar realized in his heart that this was not just a debate. It was a test that involved the honor of Islam and the morals of a Muslim. "O Allah, give me the strength to bring forth the truth in a way that pleases you," he whispered during his night prayer. His voice was almost inaudible, drowning in the silence of the room. Meanwhile, Kiai Jafar's supporters from various Muslim communities began to fill the small town. They did not come to cause a commotion, but to show solidarity in a peaceful manner. Mosques were filled with people praying to God, asking him to grant steadfastness to Kiai Jafar. "No one is afraid of this debate. What if he loses?" whispered a young man to his friend. His friend replied firmly, "He is not fighting to win in the eyes of humans. He is fighting to uphold the truth in the eyes of God." On the other hand, the city bore a starkly different atmosphere at the headquarters of Tur Jones. He seemed busy, planning a strategy to embarrass Kiai Jafar. He was enthusiastically practicing his speech, making sure every word that came out of his mouth could ignite the emotions of his opponents around him. His supporters cheered, igniting Terry's spirit with words full of hatred. "Islam is our enemy," shouted someone in the room. "We have to show the world who is right." In the midst of great pressure, Kiai Jafar did not spend his time practicing his arguments. Instead, he chose to increase his worship every night, reciting the Qur'an and teaching the hidden meaning of its verses. One verse he particularly held on to was from the Qur'an, Surah An-Nahl, 16:125. "Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in a way that is best." But that did not mean Kiai Jafar was unprepared. He reread books on the history of religion, both Islam and Christianity, to understand their points of contact and differences. He also discussed with scholars and other religious figures to ensure that the arguments he would present were not only logically strong, but also gentle in tone. "We are not here to attack," he told his team. "Our mission is to clarify and guide." The day before the debate, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. National and international media began covering the event, and all attention was focused on the auditorium where the debate would take place. In his last interview before the debate, Terry sarcastically said, "The cleric is coming to defend a religion that can't even defend itself. I will show the world that the Quran is full of contradictions and violence." Hearing this, Kiai Jafar reminded his team, "If we let ourselves be provoked, we have lost before we even begin." The night before the debate, Kiai Jafar secluded himself in his room. As he read the Quran, he came across Surah Al-Baqarah 2286. "Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear." This verse strengthened his heart, providing comfort amidst the heavy burden he felt. In the stillness of the night, he cried, not out of fear, but from the realization of the immense responsibility he carried. "O Allah," he whispered, "grant me strength. You are the one who controls the hearts of men. I am only a small intermediary in your big plan," he said in a trembling voice. In the morning, the atmosphere in the city had changed into a tense field. Anchovy supporters held a large parade with banners and packs containing hate speech against Islam. Some even brought dolls made to resemble the figure of a Muslim, complete with a turban and beard, and then burned them in the middle of the road. The scene was heartbreaking. Many Muslims came from various corners to support Kiai Jafar. On the other hand, Kiai Jafar's supporters chose to gather in a joint prayer in the courtyard of the mosque. A 10-year-old child raised his hand. His small and innocent voice prayed, "O Allah, help Kiai Jafar so that everyone can know that our religion is the truth." His small cry moved many adults who heard it. When the time came, Kiai Jafar walked towards the auditorium with steady steps. Along the way, he passed several supporters, some screaming, while others followed him silently. Kiai Jafar gave space to the ulama to remain calm and composed. As he entered the auditorium, the sound of murmurs and tension filled the air. Blood pounded in his ears as he greeted everyone, including those who opposed him. His greeting silenced most of the residents, as if they were not ready to face such unwavering politeness. In a quiet moment before the event began, Kiai Jafar closed his eyes for a brief prayer. He asked Allah for strength, whispering, "O Allah, give me the strength to face this trial." When the auditorium doors opened, a thunderous sound filled the room. The two figures, Terry Jones and Kiai Jafar, finally prepared to meet on stage. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how the fire of hatred would meet the light of truth. The large auditorium was packed. A tense atmosphere hung in the air, like lightning ready to strike. On one side of the room, Pastor Terry Jones' supporters cheered loudly. Some even carried posters with provocative slogans like, "Islam is terrorism," and "Only the Bible is true." On the other side, the Muslim community sat in silence, their faces full of hope. They knew tonight was not just about winning a debate, but about preserving the honor of Islam in front of the world. The spotlights were on, illuminating the stage, which was decorated with two podiums. Terry Jones walked in confidently, wearing a black suit and carrying a Qur'an in his hand. His smile was sarcastic, as if he had won the debate before it even started. On the other hand, Kiai Jafar walked slowly toward the podium, wearing a simple white robe and a small turban. His face was calm but full of determination. The audience was silent, transfixed by the two contrasting figures. The moderator opened the event in a formal tone, explaining the debate rules. However, the atmosphere changed when Terry took the microphone to give his opening statement. He started with a loud voice full of emotion. "Islam is a religion that brings violence to this world," he shouted. He raised the Quran in his hand and then dramatically placed it on the table. "This book," he declared, "which is said to be holy, is the source of hatred, war, and terrorism." Terry paused for a moment, giving a dramatic effect. Then suddenly he took out a match from his pocket. With a theatrical movement, he lit a fire and directed the flame toward the Quran. The atmosphere in the auditorium immediately exploded. Some of the audience cheered in support of his action. Meanwhile, the Muslim community present looked tense. Some faces turned red, while others closed their eyes, trying to hold back their anger. However, Kiai Jafar remained standing upright at the podium, showing no sign of explosive emotion. He looked at Terry with a sharp gaze and then spoke softly but clearly, his voice carrying through the room. "You may burn this paper, Pastor Terry, but you will never be able to burn the truth that is in our hearts." Those words silenced part of the audience. Even Terry's supporters seemed confused, as if they did not expect such calmness from Kiai Jafar. Terry, shaken by the response, tried to regain control. "Islam teaches murder," he shouted. "Isn't it stated in the Quran that you must kill infidels wherever you find them?" Kiai Jafar calmly took the microphone. "That verse," he began, "is from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 190. It says, 'Fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but do not transgress. Verily, Allah does not like transgressors.' This is a call to defend oneself in war, not to start a conflict." His explanation shifted the atmosphere in the room. Many in the audience who were initially skeptical began to nod, as if understanding something new. However, he did not give up. He attacked again with the issue of women. "Islam oppresses women. You force them, wearing the hijab and making them submit to men." Once again, Kiai Jafar answered calmly, "The hijab is not a compulsion, but a symbol of honor. In the Quran, Surah An-Nur, verse 31, Allah commands women to guard their honor, but also commands men to lower their gaze first. Islam never places women as lower creatures. Even the Prophet Muhammad said, 'Heaven is under the soles of the mother's feet.' Does that sound like oppression to you?" Swasak responded sharply, "That's proof that your religion is full of hatred." Kiai Jafar sighed for a moment, then said, "God cannot be judged by the bad deeds of his followers. In every religion, there are people who deviate. Isn't it true that in the history of the Crusades, there were also people who acted on the pretext of religion? But I never blame Jesus' teachings for that. because I know that his true teachings are compassion. The same goes for Islam. If there are individuals who commit violence, it is their own doing, not a religious teaching. The atmosphere returned to silence. It seemed that Suwasak was starting to lose his way. His eyes, which were previously full of confidence, were now beginning to show doubt. He tried to speak again, but his words were not as strong as before. But Islam... His voice was shaking and could no longer be heard clearly. Kiai Jafar continued, and just as Jesus taught compassion, Islam teaches the same. His words were like thunder in the silent room. Suwasak's face turned pale. His eyes began to fill with tears. He lowered his head as if trying to hide his emotions. The audience who had initially come to support Suwasak were speechless. They could not believe what they had witnessed. The priest who had previously been full of confidence was now shocked. It was not about who was stronger in the debate, but about who was able to touch the heart. And that night, Kiai Jafar proved that the truth conveyed with wisdom was much stronger than the fire of hatred. The audience, who initially came with preconceived notions, began to see something different. They saw Islam from a perspective they had never imagined before. That night, the atmosphere in the auditorium changed drastically. The tension that had previously filled the room slowly subsided, replaced by a silence full of the words of Pastor Terry Jones, who came with full confidence to destroy Islam with his arguments. His face, which had previously radiated arrogance, now showed confusion and fatigue. He looked at Kiai Jafar, who was standing calmly on the podium across from him, as if looking for a foothold to continue his attack. But there were no more cheers from the supporters of the word. Kiai Jafar's words, full of wisdom and gentleness, had succeeded in calming the anger of many people in the room. Even some of the Terry supporters began to exchange glances, as if questioning their own beliefs. Kiai Jafar, even though he was aware that the atmosphere was starting to favor him, did not show any sense of satisfaction or victory. For him, this was not about winning or losing, but conveying the truth in the best possible way. Trying to raise his voice, he explained his praise in a low voice. So many people have died in the name of your religion. Why do terrorists always quote the Qur'an to justify hurting someone? I understand why you feel that way, the priest replied, but people who use the name of religion for violence are people who have deviated. Allah says in the Qur'an, Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 32, whoever kills a human being not because that person killed another person or caused damage on earth, it is as if he had killed all of humanity. Islam views every life as sacred. Priest, if there are those who violate this principle, they do not represent Islam. Those words invited a long silence. He stared at Kiai Jafar's podium, as if trying to find a gap to attack, but found nothing. He should start to lower his gaze, trying to understand the meaning of each word he heard. Kiai Jafar did not stop there. He continued in a softer voice, almost like a father advising his son. Preacher, I am not a Muslim. I am this one. Chan hujurat ayat Allah man wahnya, and kamangangok kamen buruk yang panjang. His mouth was open as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. His tears started to flow, dripping onto the microphone he was holding. Rat, his supporters in the room, looked confused, not knowing how to react. A few seconds later, Terry put the microphone down on the table. Both his hands were shaking. My voice was breaking. I thought I knew everything. I thought my hatred was justified, but now... He stopped, took a deep breath, and looked down again. In the corner of the room, some people who previously came as supporters started to cry. Some of them held each other's hands, shocked by the change. They did not expect a young man who came wearing a t-shirt that said, "Stop Islam," to have the truth revealed to him. You have taken the first step tonight, Terry said. Her wet eyes met Kiai Jafar's sincere gaze. He said nothing, but his face showed that Haya was starting to open up to something new. The room was silent, as if everyone was mesmerized by this thrilling moment. Shortly after that, the moderator took Ali's microphone to close the event, but the atmosphere of the room was no longer the same. Many of the audience present felt that they had witnessed something much bigger than just a debate. Some of them stood up to applaud Kiai Jafar, while others walked out of the room with their heads lowered, lost in their own thoughts. After the debate was over, Kiai Jafar came out of the auditorium and was greeted by the Muslims who had been waiting for him. They cried, hugging him with full gratitude. "Allah is with you, Kiai," said a mother. "Old Kiai Jaran, and Allah don't remember our sins." Where a new Qur'an was lying, one of his staff came closer, but he raised his hand, asking to be left alone. He opened the Qur'an slowly, reading the first page with his eyes still wet. That night became a meaningful night for many people, not only for the Muslims who were present, but for those who came with love in their hearts. A seed of change had been planted, and that night became the beginning. From a new journey that will shake the beliefs of many people around the world, the night has fallen. When Kiai Jafar's supporters in the Muslim community gathered outside the auditorium, their faces, which were previously tense, have now changed to relief, although still mixed with emotion. Some of them could not hold back their tears. "Tonight God shows his greatness," said an old man while holding the hand of his small son. Kiai Jafar not only defended Islam, but also showed the true face of Islam, full of love and peace. In the auditorium, Pastor Terry Jones was still sitting alone in the back room. A silent atmosphere enveloped the room. He stared blankly at the new Qur'an lying in front of him. His trembling hands touched the cover. Opening it, page by page, the words he previously hated now seemed different. He read a piece of verse from the Qur'an, Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 46, "And do not argue with the people of the book." With tears flowing, he searched for this, "I only Melatisam." From the corner of that Sarah in outdoors, the atmosphere became a heated discussion. Several people who previously supported Terry now approached the Muslim group. One of them was a young woman with long blonde hair who looked nervous. She walked up to a member of the Muslim community and said, in a trembling voice, "I came here to support the pastor, but I feel everything he said is wrong. Kiai Jafar's words touched my heart. I want to know more about Islam." A Muslim mother gently invited her to talk. "Islam is a religion of peace. If you want to know more, we'll help," she said, holding Peru's hand. This scene was repeated in various corners wherever people were. They came with hatred, but now faced dialogue. On the other side of the city, Kiai Jafar continued to follow his desire with calm steps, but his body felt heavy. He had given everything in the debate, not only logical arguments, but also emotions in his heart, which was in sajda, prostration. "Oh Allah," he whispered. Kiai Jafar's words were not finished. The next day, national and international media reported the events of that night. The video of the debate went viral, and a clip showing Terry Jones crying on stage spread quickly. The world witnessed how a pastor, who was famous for his hatred, was actually silenced by the wisdom and patience of a Muslim. The public reaction was very diverse. Most praised Kiai Jafar's calmness and his wise response to provocation. He showed us how to deal with laziness, lazy people, and journalists like Daya from one of the big media outlets. However, there were also parties who were still interested in the Mound groups. An unexpected incident occurred when Jones approached a small mosque on the outskirts of the city. With hesitant steps, he entered the main door, accompanied by several people who knew him. The congregation, who were in the mosque, were surprised to see him arrive. But before anyone could react, he raised his hand to apologize. "I came not to hurt, but to learn," he said in a hoarse voice. One of the mosque imams approached him with a warm smile. The priest entered the mosque. This door was open to everyone, including those who wanted to learn. He nodded and stepped in. He sat on the bama floor. Others began their long journey to understand the real Islam. These doubtful angels began to rethink their views on Islam. On social media, thousands of comments emerged from people claiming to be inspired by Kiai Jafar's calmness and wisdom. Some even announced that they had decided to embrace Islam. In the same auditorium, a week after the debate, an interfaith dialogue was held. Those who had previously come to support the debate now came to listen. They wanted to know more, wanted to understand more. One of the participants, a middle-aged man, stood up and said, "I used to hate Islam, but after seeing how Kiai Jafar speaks with love and patience, I feel ashamed. Now I want to learn, not to attack, but to understand." Kiai Jafar's message spread widely, reaching various parts of the world. The video of the debate was translated into various languages, and messages of peace were shared. The peace brought by Kiai Jafar began to spread widely. He received invitations from various countries to speak about Islam and tolerance. But Kiai Jafar remained humble. "I am just a small servant," he said in an interview. "Everything that happened was because of Allah's permission." In the small mosque where he started learning, a touching scene occurred a few months later. The man, now more proud and humble, recited the Shahada before Jah. Tears of emotion filled the room, making everyone realize that hatred can turn into love when faced with wisdom. That night, when he came home from the mosque, he looked up at the sky full of stars. For the first time in his life, he felt true peace. Meanwhile, in another place, Kiai Jafar, who was on his way to another country to preach, prostrated in gratitude. For the change in a person's heart is real proof that This is the end of our video. If you enjoy Islamic content like this, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.